Okay, ladies and gents, time to make some more progress on things. So, gonna start tearing into pulling this IRS apart. So I got the little rear brackets off. I'm gonna pull the calipers off. I got other new calipers, so I'll get that apart and work on getting this whole IRS apart. I want to get it stripped down to a subframe so I can handle it easier by myself for putting up underneath the rear end of the Mustang and getting these brackets mounted up underneath that rear subframe of the car for bolting up there, of course. So like I said, this rear hole on the subframe bracket here, the mounting bracket, whatever you want to call it, doesn't line up. The front one is kind of iffy. And then I'm going to figure out what I'm going to do for the ones that mount to the bottom side of the frame rail. I'll probably work on making a little plate and cutting a hole in that subframe rail, sliding it up in there and kind of spot welding it in place with some nuts on top of a plate or something up inside of the frame rail so that I can just bolt this onto the car is what I'm thinking. I debate welding it on, but who knows what could ever happen. So I'm going to kind of play it safe in case, heaven forbid, something ever happened to this car and I want to pull this whole subframe back off. So that's my plan of attack. But like I said, first I'm going to get it all pulled apart, get all the suspension arms pulled off, get that pumpkin pulled out of there, and work on getting this rear end disassembled. Gonna give you a little update. I've been out here toiling away for probably a couple hours, took a break for dinner. But the IRS is a pile of parts now. That's what I was hoping for. So got the lower control arms there, the Crocs axis joints there, next to that kind of beat up, torn down bike rack, center pumpkin, and all the brackets, the axles, the upper control arms. Yeah, got everything all tore apart. I got the calipers and the rotors here, the rear ones. There's those brackets that'll go up on the subframe of the rear of the car. There's a subframe. It's still pretty hefty, but at least I can manage carrying it around on my own. So next step is kind of getting it bolted up in there, or get those front bolts, those old control arm bolts in there. Or lift that subframe up under there and start figuring out how I'm going to get it all connected up there. Like I said, I want to get those rear subframe mount brackets so that I can bolt them and unbolt them from the subframe in this Mustang, in the Puzzle Fox here. Just in case something ever happened, or if I ever wanted to go back to a live axle or stick axle in there, it'd be easy enough to go back to that and transfer this rear end to another car. But I'm pretty dead set on getting this in here, and I think it's going to be in there forever, but I still want to do it that way just because that's how I am and that's how I feel about doing that. So yeah, got that all apart. It all came apart pretty easy. I'm glad I had some air tools, had an impact wrench, so I got that on all the bolts to get the control arms off. So those all came off pretty easy. Used my little cordless little impact gun to impact wrench for some stuff. I was a little concerned about getting those axles out. I did find some old rags and put them over the end of the half shaft that goes into that center pumpkin, the differential carrier there. But it was just a matter of getting a pry bar in there and just giving it a little pop, and those half shafts popped right out. I'm trying to think of what I had big issues with getting out. It was a little bit tricky just because these front bolts on the lower control arms go through this bracket here, and these two bolts bolt up to the front of this differential carrier, the center section here. But that was a little bit tricky getting out of there, and just because everything is, it's almost like this differential is hanging in that subframe. So it's a little bit tricky to get out, because once you undo some bolts, then you'd have a little bit more tension on other bolts. And then, like I said, these lower control arm bolts go through this bracket that goes underneath the front edge of that differential carrier, that center pumpkin. Yeah, and it was just a little bit tricky. There's tons of washers and this extra little bracket that goes underneath that differential carrier. And yeah, it was just kind of tricky. Like I said, it's all hanging in there. So once you undid something, then it seemed like something else was binding. And then to actually get that subframe off, I had to take these bolts out of here that were here holding in the sensors that go for the ABS for the tone rings here on the inside of the half shaft. Looks like I do have one more piece to get out. I did loosen up this bolt that were the back side. So this bolts up to the back end of that differential right there. So yeah, got it all apart. It was a little bit tricky, kind of wrestling it around out here on my own, but got everything out of there. Calipers were a little tricky. Like this one was, this goes and clips in the onto the caliper, so you have to undo this snap ring, but there was just enough tension on there where it was hard to get that caliper off and over that rotor. So there was a few little tricky bits and things where I had to wrestle, and caused a little grief for me, but not too bad. Had this apart in a few hours, and I think it'll be good to go. So I'll have that all. Want to get that mounted in there and then figure out how I'm going to run brake lines too on here. So I'll probably end up putting the upper and lower control arms and those cross-axis joints there just to figure out where I'm going to run brake lines to when I get to that point. But getting a little bit ahead of myself here. First things first, get that subframe kind of mocked up under the car and get those mounts mounted on the frame rails. Next step. So can cross another thing off the list. Got the IRS disassembled. Love it when a plan comes together. Got those bolts slid in there. You can tell those are bigger holes in the bushings, bigger slots in the bushings. That suspension hangs in there kind of loose. Alright, so I got the rear subframe, the IRS subframe up underneath the car, and I got it jacked up about where it's going to sit. And I can tell, it seems like some bolt holes aren't lining up just perfect. I know it's probably kind of hard to see, but to center up this bracket so it's kind of centered over the hole in the subframe, it's a little bit far ahead on the hole that's up there in the frame, kind of up by where my thumb is right here. So I think I got a little work to do here. I know this bump stop is gonna have to go at some point, but it's up in there and it's snug. Some engineers did some good work to get this to fit up underneath basically a Fox body style frame on the New Edge cars in those Cobras 99 through 04. It's looking good. Got it in here. I think that looks pretty good for now. And I'll start toying around with things, trying to get those brackets on the back. Figuring out what I'm going to do, how I'm going to do that. I think I'm gonna kind of call it quits for today and kind of do some thinking and pondering about next steps here about mounting the rear mounting brackets for the IRS subframe. So I thought I'd grab a light and just kind of show you what I'm dealing with here. So I got the front control arm bolts in there for the front of the subframe, and I just have this kind of jacked up and kind of in place here. You can see that the bracket's a little bit loose there, but kind of gives you an idea. I think I'll be okay for lining up that rear bolt in there. And then it's kind of weird with this slanted down, it actually lines up perfect with that one in the back, but I want to be able to get this bracket like flat against the bottom of the frame rail here. So I think I'm going to have to do some trimming up above here on this inner fender well so that bracket can go all the way up where it needs to go. And I think I'll have to do that on both sides. I'll probably look at seeing what it takes to get this bump stop off of here, or I'll just cut it off or something. I hate to kind of do that, but... And it's the same story on this side. Front bolt is in that control arm, or where the control arm used to go. And same story here, this side. It's just hanging kind of free and loose right now. But you get the idea. Things should line up pretty well. What I'm thinking I'm going to do is, right now I'm thinking I'm going to take this rear bolt and move it up in the frame rail. So cut another hole in there, knock that off, move it up and weld it in. Then I'm going to cut a hole in the bottom of the frame rail about here, get a plate or get a little plate, weld some nuts onto it, pop it up into there, drill some holes in the bottom of the frame, spot weld that in with those nuts up inside the frame, then cover up the hole in the bottom of the frame rail again, weld it smooth, and run some bolts through the bottom of the bracket and bolt it up there. So that's my thoughts for now. Gonna do a little more thinking and pondering before I do start cutting holes and cutting stuff off of the car. Again, I think I'll have to trim up this inner fender to make room for this bracket. So that's where I'm sitting at right now. Next steps is getting that done. I will be going on vacation with some friends this week. So I don't think I'll be spending much time out in the garage for about the next week to a week and a half here. So got some other stuff I need to do before I'm on vacation, and then I'll probably have stuff to do when I'm back. And so the Mustang might be sitting here for a week or two before I touch it much again.